Ciao, it's Taylor. I'm checking in from Miami, Florida again. I wanted to talk about this issue about women with male friends. I've heard a lot of opinions about how men and women not only can't be friends, but shouldn't be friends, especially when a woman's in a relationship. Now, I think there's some nuance that we need to introduce into this situation. It's impossible for sociable, extroverted, well-connected women to not have any male friends, especially if she's been single for a long time. She's going to have developed some substantial male friendships along the way, some maybe even very much like family. So to just write them off as soon as you get into a relationship is not necessarily fair or reasonable. Now, I absolutely get the criticism, and maybe you do too. So a man has probably had an experience where the women who maybe are a little bit narcissistic or a little bit egotistical, arrogant, all those sorts of things, that the women that seek validation from other people other than her significant other, she goes way over the top and really kind of has these male orbiters around her. And orbiters mean they're supposed to be platonic male friends, but really they're just men who are attracted to the woman but aren't really, they're waiting until they get a chance with her sexually, and so they orbit around her. That's where the term comes from. And so the women kind of soak up all the benefits really of having these male orbiters who are male friends that actually are really interested in her. So they do a lot of things for her. They pay her attention, they give her validation, they take her out, they do favors for her, like moving or whatever. And so that is a reasonable criticism for especially someone who's in a relationship, for the man to say, now listen, I'm not comfortable with this guy likes you, he's attracted to you, he wants to take an opportunity when he has it, and I'm not comfortable with that. But there are going to be instances where maybe she has a valid friendship with a man. So it's important to figure out when and how these can occur. So one of the tips that I share with couples is if you're friends with, let's say a woman is friends with a man and he has a significant other, or then becomes a part of a couple, it's important for that woman to then seek out the other woman, the significant other of her male friend, and to really make an effort to build a friendship with her and to kind of go through her as the mediator in regards to asking for favors, a pickup from the airport, or whatever the case may be, if you have a flat tire. So you're going to have that communication open between the females first and foremost, but obviously there's that history there with the male friend. And then it feels appropriate. It feels like everything is above board. Obviously he should not be orbiting you because he's interested, because he has his own relationship. But in that case, if the woman's boyfriend is insecure about their relationship, then you need to talk about trust and how to build that and reassure each other that there's nothing untoward happening in regards to that friendship. So if there is an issue of emotional intimacy being split between your significant other and your friend, then I think that's a reasonable thing to bring up for discussion. And you might say, you know what, I would rather you come to me for those things. I don't mind you having conversations with them about significant things that are going on in your life, but I don't want him to be a replacement for me in your life. And so have those conversations, be completely transparent, and I think that's a way to really navigate away from some of the problems. Now, sometimes it has nothing to do with a sexual attraction or the likelihood of anything like that happening, anything romantic happening between the two male-female platonic friends, but it's that, not just jealousy, but that connection that then sort of is neglected from your significant other. So I think that's why it is a valid concern. But in regards to just generally chatting with the opposite sex, like let's say social media is such a big deal, right? So if you're someone who, like myself, I work with social media, I work online, But even if you don't, if you're working in an office space and there's a lot of people of the opposite sex, and maybe, this is a new relationship and you've had these friendships for a long time, or maybe you have to travel or you have to go to conferences or you go to big group things and there's people of the opposite sex that you interact with. You need to have clear boundaries around communication. Late at night, you're not accepting calls or messages. But if you are having some type of correspondence with people of the opposite sex, online or maybe directly on WhatsApp or iMessage or whatever type of platform you use, that you make it very clear what the context is and you shut down any inappropriate conversations right away and talk about it with your significant other. You do not want to seek out, this is another thing, you don't want to seek out new relationships or friendships with the opposite sex. You don't need to. You shouldn't need to. If it's something, one thing if it's unavoidable and you're just being civil and maybe, you've already sort of developed that friendship along the way before you had this relationship. So that's a different story, but there's no reason to then seek out a new man, or if you're a man, a new woman, to then have these sort of chats with. And there was someone on Twitter that actually wrote a little bit of a thread about this. And I don't know if you're on Twitter, if you follow him, but I really thought it was an interesting thread and part of the reason why I'm doing this video, because he said sort of like a zero tolerance policy that you should not be bantering with men, his girlfriend should not be bantering with men because it's a form of flirting and that's unacceptable. And he doesn't do it, so she shouldn't do it. And I understand the rules go both ways, but you might be dealing with someone who is very reserved and not talkative, and maybe you need to have more engagement and conversation. So what I would suggest is seek out female friends to do that. But if you have long-standing established friendships with male friends, I do not see that that's problematic on the surface. Like, as long as if the boundaries is very secure and very clear, and you're able to keep the conversation out of inappropriate realms. So not gossiping about your relationship, not talking about intimate things that you should be talking to your partner about, even if they're not a talker. You need to get over the resistance that you have. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's discomfort, awkwardness in talking about things with your partner. If you cannot have those conversations that you should be having with your partner, and then instead of working through that difficulty, going to another guy and talking to them about it, then that should be a signal that maybe this isn't the right relationship for you. So the man in that situation is quite in the right, and it's a very valid complaint to say, hey, this is unacceptable and there's something wrong with this. Let's deal with the issue. The actual issue is not that you're talking to a guy. It's that maybe we're not compatible. Maybe there's just a communication blockage, and that barrier needs to be worked through. So let's take some time and let's address that. Let's process what's going wrong. Let's process what's going right. Let's come up with some strategies that could help us overcome those barriers, and maybe it takes some time and effort, but it's absolutely doable if you face it head on. So those are some tips for you. And if I can wrap them up, it's look at the nuance of the friendship. If it's someone that they've had a relationship with for a long time, then cutting it off, it could be very unreasonable. If they have a significant other, then the friendship can kind of pivot on the same-sex person and not the original friend who is the opposite sex. Make sure that these friends are not orbiters. Make sure that there are barriers and boundaries so that the friendship is appropriate. If it's a networking or collegial or co-worker sort of situation, or to do with work or any type of other community or group activity, make sure that it is specific to that context and it doesn't go into a personal realm. And in this case, chatting to people should not sort of interfere or get in the way with your emotional intimacy or intellectual intimacy too, the sharing of ideas between you and your significant other. So So remember that, apply that, practice it, and see if it's helpful. And I would love to hear back from you. So go ahead and leave me a comment below. Hit that subscribe button so that you get all of the videos, which are coming out twice a week. And if you need to talk to me one-on-one, you can check out my website. You can contact me directly, email me, and I would be happy to hear from you. So, ciao!